some superhumans among us who just aren't really affected by horror, whether it's grudge-style ghosts, The Walking Dead, or a run-of-the-mill demon possession, they just aren't too fazed. If that sounds like you, then I congratulate you, but this particular list is for the rest of us. The ones that earned the Nope achievement in Amnesia: The Dark Descent by letting the game boot, watching the first cutscene, and then quitting out of the game immediately. Okay, so in most horror games we definitely got past the first cutscene, but there were undoubtedly moments that made us decide this is all way too spooky. Whether it was for an hour, a day, a week, or you never picked up the game again, we've rounded up 10 times video games got so overwhelmingly terrifying that you thought to yourself, you know, I think I'm just gonna go do something else, and maybe switch on some extra lights. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video game moments so scary you stopped playing. Number 10. The Ladder. Fear. The beauty, or horror if you prefer, of the way that the Fear games handle terror is that they're really expertly paced. Monolith Productions is very good at making you think something is gonna happen and then not hitting you with anything at all, making you push on even more tense than you were before. Along the same lines, the studio is also really good at hitting you with jump scares at points you absolutely wouldn't expect to see one. This case is pretty infamous for that, and it's so damn unsettling, I'm betting it's stuck in your memory whether you want it there or not. As tense as horror games can be, generally ladders are seen as fairly safe places. I mean, you're basically stuck on the ladder as your character, so you can't really draw a weapon if you get attacked, and all you can do is go up and down. Easy. If anything, it's a bit of a breather, and far better than skulking around dark corners. Not in Fear though. The game whips out its creepy little girl antagonist Alma in one of the most alarming ways when she appears as you begin your ladder descending animation. As soon as you spin around, she appears briefly on the upper landing and giggles at you. It's a very small moment but so affecting, and it absolutely feeds into the relentless dread of moving through this game. In case your pants were still dry, not to worry, get to the bottom of the ladder and there's another jump scare waiting for you there too. So basically, screw that ladder. Take a breather if you need to, or just don't go back to the game. I won't tell anybody. Number 9. Returning to the Ishimura. Dead Space 2. Dead Space is a heavyweight in the survival horror space for a reason, so we'd be remiss not to include one of its horrifying moments here. While we're pretty spoiled for choice across the franchise in terms of moments that prove too much for some players to handle, one of the most unsettling comes during Dead Space 2. Just over halfway through the game, you'll encounter Chapter 10, Deja Vu on the Ishimura, which, as the name implies, involves Isaac having to revisit the horrifying ship. All the way through, Dead Space delivers terror through its sound, visuals, immersion, and plenty of other psychological tricks, and this level really synthesizes all of that into a specific kind of nightmare. This section is particularly horrifying because it really nails the suspense. So little happens in the opening of the level, but you know it's only a matter of time until you realize you're not alone. It's eerie, it's unsettling, and waiting for the inevitable necromorph pop gets almost sickeningly tense. Between the flashbacks, the disturbing audio logs, and the incredibly tense sounds that you hear as you're moving about the ship, it's actually almost a relief when the big bad does pop up to crack the tension. Number 8. That's a Bad Dog. Resident Evil. You didn't think I was gonna write this list and not include one of horror's greatest all-time nope I'm not playing this anymore moments, did you? It might be dated in retrospect, but the dog leaping through the window in Resident Evil marked one of the most iconic jump-out-of-your-seat moments in what would kick off one of the greatest horror franchises of all time. This scene was classic, even the 2002 movie of the same name recreated it, to great effect I might add. But it was the fixed camera angle horror of walking down hallways, totally unsure of what might crop up next, and then hearing breaking glass and all of a sudden facing off against zombie dogs that let 1,000 screams ring out across households around the world. With the absolute speed of the man-eating canines and the complete inability to brace yourself for this one, you'd be forgiven for shutting off the game to get your heart rate back to normal before continuing on. Number 7. The Groom. Outlast Whistleblower. Potentially controversial opinion here, but I don't actually think the first Outlast game is too scary, and that's for one very big reason. Running like hell is a very viable strategy in almost every situation. Not with the Groom though. In the Whistleblower DLC, you'll come face to face with someone who is fairly easily one of the nastiest bad guys in video games. Not only is he your run-of-the-mill crazy murderous type, he's a little lonely. And, well, he wants to cut your junk off and make you his bride. I can't think of a more chill way of saying that. As you can imagine, you spend a lot of this DLC running away from him, desperately trying to hide when that fails, and it's especially concerning as the stakes are pretty freaking high because of the whole not wanting to have your junk cut off thing. Outlast had already mastered its creepy night vision camera mechanic, mad dash running sections, and jump scares, but this section forces you to slow down and absorb the fear. Piling on dealing with the psychotic Eddie Gluskin, the twisted narrative, relentless panic, and sickening visuals makes this an experience you could be forgivably desperate to put down. Number 6. The Rat King, The Last of Us Part 2. Sometimes the scariest scenes that make us absolutely require a screen break after playing are the ones that come in games we don't expect to scare us that much. Despite the totally valid creepiness of the clickers, The Last of Us isn't a horror game, and once you nail the pattern of skulking around quietly, even the clickers shouldn't worry you too much, especially if you've been hoarding firepower. That doesn't so much apply to the Rat King in Part 2 though, who is as disgusting and horrifying in the game as it is in real life. Just like the cordyceps virus, actually. The Last of Us Part 2 is phenomenally crafted, which is all well and good for the developers, but it's pretty nauseatingly scary for those of us on the other end, enduring the claustrophobic, blood-soaked hallways, skin-crawling tension, and horrifying boss encounter. The garbled screams coming out of this monstrosity are bad enough, quite apart from the fact that you need to run like a bat out of hell, navigating poorly lit hallways, and mashing quicktime encounters as fast as possible. You always know something's gonna crop up in these games, but no one expected the almost invincible mutant blob. I feel like I need to lie down just watching a replay of this one. Abby might not have been everybody's cup of tea, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the Rat King can go do one. We're all in this together. Number 5. San Cristobal Medical Facility, Alien Isolation. Right up there with the survival horror greats, Alien Isolation did a perfect job of making you feel exactly how somebody would when stalked by one of the scariest monsters ever created. Much like many of the other games on this list, you can really take your pick of when players might want to put this one down out of fear, but there are two things we know for sure. The first is that a lot of players did actually put this game down because it was too scary. And the second is that when you properly first see the xenomorph, everything gets a little bit too real. Alien Isolation is an interesting case because I'd argue the beginning of the game isn't all that scary. Not to worry though, the ante gets so upped you'll be longing to go back to when everything was a whole lot more calm. The San Cristobal Medical Facility is when things start to get real and the alien is first properly introduced. The game lets you off the rails a lot more, and it's up to you to avoid the alien and not get nabbed. It quickly becomes apparent that you're a fish in a very dark barrel that's also inhabited by a shark. If the alien abandoned hospital combo doesn't get you, the lack of weapons you have at this point, the sounds of alien footsteps, and the compulsory stealth elements will. Hide or die, that's pretty much it. This one will either have you boasting at how you bested the level, or quietly putting it down, pretending maybe you never played it in the first place. Number 4. Dolores, Visage. Sad Square Studios' 2020 psychological horror game Dolores is so scary, it's honestly hard to even watch clips of this game if you're not a horror fanatic. The game is divided into several chapters, and perhaps the most mind-breaking and terrifying is called Dolores. You'll wander through a very spooky house, learn its layout, and see its stories unfold as you go. You have a sanity meter to contend with, and paranormal events will occur as you move about the map. The whole thing is quite honestly an absolute nightmare, and it's probably the closest we're ever going to get to a full game version of Hideo Kojima's PT. Whether it's creeping dread that gets you, psychological horrors that bury deep inside your brain, or highly effective jump scares, this game has it all. Everything's just a bit too quiet right up until it isn't, to the point where it feels like you're being toyed with. While every chapter is terrifying in various ways, Dolores delivers a plethora of unexpected scares, and an endlessly mounting dread that escalates to the point where you can't quite take it anymore. Catching horrible things out of the corner of your eye that you can't totally confirm you saw, hearing indecipherable, unsettling things, and trying to press on anyway is a serious exercise in being the baddest, bravest gamer around. If you find most horror games to not be scary enough and you haven't tried your hand at this one, there's a good chance it's made for you. Number 3. The Prison, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. It's no secret that Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and Frictional's whole back catalogue for that matter, have firmly cemented themselves as some of the scariest games ever made. The added horror of being unable to defend yourself with only tinderboxes, an oil lamp, and conveniently placed cupboards at our disposal makes Amnesia an incredibly tough hang. There is some disagreement as to which area is the most terrifying in The Dark Descent, with the choir, storage, and the flooded cellar all prime selections, but I'm gonna go with the prison because that's when I put this one down. By the prison level, you're pretty acquainted with the pattern of running and hiding from ghoulish gatherers, and making progress little by little, even though you're horribly frightened. But that's about to get much more difficult. You see, the prison is dark as heck, confusing, and riddled with enemies. Within the first minute of walking in, you hear growling and wailing in the distance. You're relentlessly pursued as you try to make progress, and the whole thing is anxiety-inducing enough to have you crawling into the corner of a cell, staring at the wall, and hoping you don't become gatherer chum. Or was that just me? Let me know in the comments. The game is so clever at eliciting this absolutely primal fear that you just about get paralyzed and can't will yourself to push on, unless you have the ability to repeat the "it's just a game, it's just a game" mantra. Number 2. Crawling Woman, Fatal Frame 3. Fatal Frame, or Project Zero as it was known in some regions, is another masterful horror series that's pretty much unbeatable at its best. Unbeatable, of course, for the purposes of this list, meaning so scary you absolutely want to put it down. Again, if we look through the series, there are so many terrifying enemies and unsettling moments to choose from here. You've got the decapitated head you spot through a peephole, broken neck lady, long arm guy, fallen woman, and the creepy kid twins, which will sound like a weird, vague who's who of NPCs if you don't know what I'm talking about. The game's clever mechanic, which only lets you defeat ghosts by pointing a camera at them, going into first person, and doing the most damage when they're right about to strike, is psychotically genius as far as horror systems go. There's no escape here. Not from the freaky enemy designs, the intense feeling of vulnerability and being constantly under threat, or the claustrophobic fixed camera angles. One of the scariest ghosts you'll come up against is Crawling Woman in Fatal Frame 3. Basically, you're in this tiny little crawl space when you happen upon her, making it really hard to get away from her quickly or put any distance between the two of you. And as you can imagine, that makes this whole encounter nigh on traumatizing. It doesn't help that she scurries around like a spider and her whole face gapes at you when she strikes. So much nope in so many ways. From the slow introduction of every ghost to the sinister environments, nowhere is safe in Fatal Frame games, and you'd be well forgiven for preferring to put them down as a result. Number 1. Lisa Attacking, Seeing Lisa Anywhere, the whole freaking game, PT. Earlier we mentioned Visage is really terrifying in how it properly emulates a lot of what made PT so scary. Well, I'm sure you can gather if we were going to put Visage on the list, then PT was absolutely going to make it as well. Hideo Kojima's horror masterpiece PT is just about in a realm of its own when it comes to showcasing a series of moments so scary it frightens players off. You can really take your pick here, as almost everything that happens is a fair enough moment to decide the playable teaser is just a little bit too scary. Whether it's the chilling appearance of Ghost Lisa appearing at the window, on the landing, down the hallway right behind you, in the crack in the bathroom door, or the fetus crying in the bathroom sink, this game is a nightmare simulator that only the toughest horror fans have made it all the way through. That's it for this list. I'm so scared I need to go turn on all the lights in my entire home, but make sure you leave me a comment in that section down below if you can think of any other video game moments so scary you had to put the game down. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here because we've got plenty more gaming goodness.